Welcome back, everybody. This is Joseph from the My Cross, His Grace radio podcast. When we left off last, we were talking about increasing prayer life. And it occurred to me afterwards, naturally, that not everybody is into Bible reading itself and may not want to be just because we talked about it. It may have some folks thinking about it, and that's great. So a tip on Bible reading itself for those who are not into it but want to be would be to maybe start with the Gospels in the New Testament, starting with John, for example. But there's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. John's a good one to start with. It's an easy read and it's a beginning. Another way into it, and listen, there's no perfect way. Whatever works best for you is the method you should go with. But to suggest a few ideas, a few thoughts, another way would be, an increasingly popular item in the last few years, you don't hear much about it, but they make great gifts and they're out there, is those daily devotionals. You'll even find them in the grocery store on that inspirational book rack, in bookstores, at the airports, and that kind of thing. They come in various kinds. Go look at them. It's like a daily devotional, right? It's not a monthly planner per se, although you can get them that way. But it's got the year in there, the month, the day, and verses for that particular day. And it's a great way to read a few verses, to understand a few lines, have a spiritual moment, let's say before you get in your car and make that commute, or after you've arrived at the office. It's another way perhaps to start your day and to get into it. So consider that in your thinking. Did you ever hear of a guy named Boaz in the Bible? There's a fellow named Boaz. He was ruthless. But then he married Ruth and he wasn't ruthless anymore. So that's a biblical fact. You can find that in the book of Ruth, but maybe not the way I just said it, but it's in there. Okay? Another guy I want you to be aware of, I know you're aware of this, but I have to reference it. It'll make sense in a second. Joseph. Not me, but Joseph in the Bible, one of the Josephs in the Bible. The one who was from the 12 tribes of Israel, and his brothers were jealous of him. They sold him off, and he ended up in Egypt, and he became a favorite and a well-placed, high-ranking official, second to the Pharaoh in Egypt. Well, one of the things that Joseph was doing was he saved a fifth of every crop that he was raising and responsible for. He was saving food. He was saving grain, in effect, is food, for the famine that they were expecting to come. So in a matter of speaking, Joseph was the first prepper, or at least one that we can point to and say, okay, it's in the Bible. All right, why are we talking about that? Consider the day and age that we live. You see trouble in the world here and there and all these different things, and the feeling of the moment. And sometimes I've heard people say and wonder aloud, I wish I lived in a different time when a different relative or age was such that people didn't have to worry about the stuff that we worry about today. With the prices of gasoline getting as high as it is and expected to get higher. With the cost of food, it's hard to go into a grocery store and not drop $100. And for the money that you are paying, you're getting less for it. They're calling that shrinkflation. You're paying more for something that you enjoy, but there's less of it in the product, and you know you're being taken advantage of. And why is that happening? Maybe because there's less of it to go around, so they divide it up into smaller packages, but charge you more for it. Remember when people were looking for toilet paper? All right. Suppose you went into your grocery store and you were looking for something and you know where to go and it's not there. The shelves in that section are bare. Again, remember when people were looking for toilet paper? Okay. You know where your grocery store is. Where would you go if that particular store was closed for some reason or out of what you were looking for? What's the next nearest grocery store that you would go to? Think about that for a moment. Now think, what if the first and the second store did not have the things that you needed? Where would you go after that? There's not a lot of grocery stores everywhere or in every community. Usually there's only one or two within a reasonable driving distance, right? If you live in the cities, it might be even further to the next second or third place you might think to go to, all right? There's a hurricane coming, so people go out and they get stuff, all right? It's going to rain, it's going to snow, and people get stuff. I want you to start thinking about getting stuff and putting stuff aside for that time when you may not be able to get out to the store, or you recognize from news reports or something else that there's a panic in the store. There's some chaos going on. People are fighting each other in the aisles. We definitely don't want that to happen, but what if it did? How could you supply yourself? Most grocery stores in the United States only have about 3 days worth of product for you. If they're not resupplied every 3 days, it's not there. If there's increases in diesel fuel, or diesel fuel is harder to get for the trucks that would move product from one place to another, then the delivery's not going to come, and you're going to find shelves that are bare. I say that to suggest that be thinking about that, because everything is not as well oiled now as it once was. Not that it's broken and not working. It seems as though it's being engineered to slow down and cause you an inconvenience. However way it's happening, it's happening. And what that means for us is we have to be like Joseph and prepare, prepare. Prepare for the day when a shortage occurs. How do you do that? Keep something extra more in the closet. What's a good barometer of sorts to measure? What would be enough? 30-day supply, 60-day supply, ideally at a minimum as a goal, a 90-day supply of food and things, so you didn't have to go out to the store. You know, I remember many years ago, I can't think of the year, we had odd and even gas days. Well, it was during the Carter administration, when depending on how the last digit of your license plate was, the number, odd numbers was you could get gas on one day, even numbers you got gas on the day after, and that rotated as a way to limit the lines at the gas station. So in the food sense, be thinking about shortages that may come and prepare for that. How soon should you be thinking about doing that? Many yesterdays ago. It's a different world today, it's a different time. But at the same time, you got to take care of yourself and avoid those problems or conflicts that we might find in a grocery store, which we really haven't seen other than the toilet paper episode. It's funny to talk about and to reference from time to time. But genuinely speaking, we got to get serious about what's going on. We know that there's a lot of increased immigration over our north and southern borders. And with that being the case, there's demands on all the systems, all the stores, on goods and services. And so we're going to find, if we haven't already, that things that we're looking for will be harder to get, and if we do find them, they'll be more expensive to purchase. So use that as a barometer of sorts to think about what you would do in those circumstances. Now, you've heard me say in this piece that if you live in the city, these are things to consider and why. Don't take any increased comfort if you're not a person who lives in this city but lives further away, even in, let's say in a more remote area. So I don't got to worry about that. There's not many people up where I live, say. You can't take any comfort, because if you can live in that place away from the city, then you could be identified as somebody who has more goods to be able to sustain yourself there away from the stores. You see what I mean? So you got to be careful, but you also have to be wise, and you have to do as Joseph did, be willing and able to store stuff for a famine if it comes. Food is not only something that we need to survive, but it can be used as a weapon against you if there's not enough to go around. And we don't want to get to that. But I ask you to think about hard times. We're in hard times now. We don't want them to get harder, but we don't know if they will. And that goes to the planning, to the preparation thing. You hear the term preppers. Why do people prep? It's just forward thinking and planning for that rainy day, the storm. So we want to avoid that for everybody. So that's all I got for you today. I wanted to reference that and have you thinking about it. It's true with gasoline and everything else. You know, there seems to be no control at America's borders right now. You know from news reports what's going on the southern border, and you know, who knows what the numbers are. They're crazy. If you weren't aware, there's an increase in immigration of 863% on our northern border from Canada into the United States. You don't hear very much discussion about that, but that's a factor too. And then you have your sanctuary cities, where for the longest time, you know from news reports and such that, you know, the mayors of these different cities, hey, we're a sanctuary city, come on in. And now many of those celebrated cities, in particular New York, is saying enough. We're being overrun, and we got to stop it. We got to slow it down. The city itself is struggling to stay afloat, to be able to meet their own responsibilities and obligations, let alone assuming those for the mass migration of humanity coming into their borders. So these are all considerations that put demands and drains on the systems, on the food supply, logistics, goods and services, commodities, prices. It's crazy out there. But you have to be grounded in your faith to remain strong, to know that you can get through hard times. And the way you do that is by planning, praying, and being strong in the faith, and knowing that we'll get through to a brighter side. And another thing, while we do this, and initially you do it for yourself, be thinking about your neighbor, your friend, your relative, even a stranger. This is a unique time. Why are we here now in this day and age and having to think about these things and to go through them? We don't know. But God appointed us to this time to be who we are in this place. So we may have to minister, you and I, to others who are weaker in the faith and who think this is the end of the world. It's not. But if they give up, we don't want them to give up. We want to encourage them in the faith. I'm going to ask you to do that as a prayer warrior, as a friend, as a Christian, to look out for your neighbor and to look out for yourself. We can do that, and we have to have hope, and we have to maintain the faith. I say spread the faith, not keep the faith. Spread the faith. We kept it long enough. Spread the joy. Thank you for listening to me. This is Joseph, and this is the My Cross, His Grace podcast radio. Have a good night. Thank you.